There are pockets of really rich data, but they're pockets and they're not well connected. So what we're doing is really pulling those pockets of data together and basically creating a picture of what goes wrong where and how often in cannabis supply chains, where stuff goes wrong and blows up in cultivation, where that happens in manufacturing, retail, last mile home delivery, where that happens in testing labs.
Welcome to How to Flourish in Cannabis. I'm your host, Brian Weber. How to Flourish in Cannabis is a bi-weekly educational focused show with proven leaders in regulated cannabis. Our guests have a wide range of industry experience: lawyers, accountants, brands, growers, tech leaders, and more. One thing all our guests have in common is having a track record of success in this extremely challenging industry. Our guests are asked to give general educational knowledge in a subject matter they're experts in. No pitches here. This is designed to be a masterclass in regulated cannabis. Today, I am very pleased to have James Whitcomb. James is the founder of Frontier Risk, the first insurtech company entirely dedicated to the cannabis industry. James was the founding member and chairman and CEO of Parallel, which for many years was the country's largest private multi-state operator. When he led Parallel, he transformed the organization to a lean cost structure, able to win back substantial market share. Along the way, James noticed the problem of high insurance costs for cannabis operators and decided to do something about it, pulling together an expert team of cannabis operators and insurance executives for a truly new solution. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be with you.
Well, before we dive into Frontier Risk and a little bit more about your background, one thing I want to ask all our guests is, what prompted you to get into cannabis? Like, I know your background, it's really amazing pedigree background, and then you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go sell legal weed.
Yeah, it's certainly at the time there was a lot more stigma involved in the industry. This was in the sort of late 2015, early 2016 timeframe. I was working on Wall Street at a prestigious firm, and I've told this story before, but when I went to tell my managing partner that I was leaving and what I was leaving to go do, let's just say, it didn't even register with him. He couldn't even fathom why I would kind of go take, that kind of financial risk, and more importantly, that type of reputational risk in walking away from something, very stable. To be radically transparent about this, I didn't jump into the cannabis space at that time for, an altruistic or mission-driven reason, to be honest. I jumped into it because I wanted to build a business. I wanted to build a business that sold products. Certain things in my personal life were decently flexible. No wife, no kids. Unlike now, we're very happily married with 2 children, but certainly would not have that flexibility for such a radical move today. Packed up my U-Haul on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and the next day was down in Atlanta, helping to get things really started back at Parallel. The first couple of years were just a complete blur. We were on the road all the time, just living out of suitcases, moving around. Made it, to the sort of upper tiers of Delta's kind of most premier Sky Miles program. My proudest accomplishment in my life. Time just melded together. It was very complex back then, and it was before I think everybody realized just how much capital it was really going to take to be a successful MSO. And we were really stringing things together and just kind of living check to check and making it work, trimming plants during the day, personally, and balancing the books at night. I was the company's first CFO. Very quickly after that, I think it became personal for me and became more mission-driven for me in the sense that, I was spending a lot of time just working, operating out of our very first retail door on the north side of Tampa in Florida, watching mothers coming in. And, back then it was a lot of oil-based products, right? That was before flower was legal in Florida. So a lot of it was in tincture form in the early days, as a lot of folks will remember. And, witnessing personally mothers coming into the store, with epileptic children and saying, hey, after my child took this product, they were able to not have a seizure for long enough, to say mama or dada for the first time. And getting those testimonials within the first couple of months of leaving my Wall Street career, that changed me, right? And that made it mission driven, from there on out.
Yourself with Parallel, with us here at Flourish, we have a deep background, and as this show grows, I want to have leaders that are really well versed in deep industry knowledge and really know some of the more macro elements that are driving costs and still challenges within this industry. And that's really why I wanted to have you on today. And I really love what you guys are doing at Frontier Risk to be able to solve some of those problems. And it's, like as a business owner, insurance is kind of like, unless you're really into insurance, you kind of know some of the buckets that you have to check and why it's there. But there's a lot of mystery with it. And in the operators I talk to, and like everything in this industry is just an extra cannabis tax expensive. But for people who are really attacking these problems head on, like you guys are, I wanted to speak, you to speak today from a macro perspective, and then also just from a more actionable item of like, how can operators make better decisions when buying insurance? Because although it's not the most sexiest topic in the world, it is very expensive, and it's even more expensive if you don't get the right coverage. It does impact the bottom line very much. So without further ado, we do have a bit of a schedule on some of the items that we wanted to go today. So today's subject, just to kick it off, is why cannabis insurance is so tricky and how to navigate it. And one of the first talking points, actually the first talking point that we have here today, is what are cannabis operators getting right and wrong with insurance?
If there's one thing that cannabis operators can do in the self-help department, in the realm of insurance, I think it's about better organization of data. The reality is that cannabis companies capture a lot of data, right? They're required to use certain seed-to-sale software systems. Those systems capture hundreds, in a lot of cases, thousands of fields, right? And the more that they can be, I would say, even militant about tracking and organizing their data, in a structured way and passing that along to insurance providers, specifically their insurance broker, the more that broker is going to be able to take that information and say, hey, look, Mr. Carrier, Mr. Reinsurer, operational trends in the grow have looked like this, right? Let's take a specific example. Every cultivator, right, is in the business of monitoring their environmental controls on an ongoing basis, okay? And, if they open up their seed-to-sale tracking system, they can see where the humidity in a certain grow room is right now. And if they probably go back through their files and spend enough time sort of stringing things together, they can probably paint a historical picture of what humidity has been in a certain room over a certain amount of time, right? Getting more organized about that and sort of having folks in the organization that, can carve out a few hours per week to get data more structured and more organized. It allows a broker like me, I'm not just a broker, right? We also are really a capacity provider as well on the MGA side. It allows folks like us to come in and look at that and say, hey, Mr. Carrier, hey, Mr. Reinsurer, look how well they've been able to control their environment. Look at all the tools that they have to make sure that the property is not only staying sort of in harmony, but it's also not catching on fire, right? Which is what folks who are underwriting property policies care about, especially even as it relates to grow lights.
That was one thing when we talking originally, grow lights have a huge factor in insurance costs on that. Something I didn't know, but everyone who I've talked to in the lighting industry was like, yeah, we know that.
Yeah, they certainly, look, short story there, right? High pressure sodium, more likely to explode, right? More likely to explode. Have debris falling onto the plant, starting a fire. That's one thing underwriters in cannabis care about a lot. LED is the way to go from a pure risk perspective, risk mitigation perspective. I'm not here to comment on the unique situations in which HPS actually produces a better flower.
Yep. That's that. But just more from insurance costs. Okay. So really, just to take away from that one is, if you're an operator, want better insurance rates on this, collect more data, better data, and present that to your broker for proof of operational consistency and reduction of risk is really something that you can do like literally right today to help your insurance rates.
Yeah, that's right. Look, everyone's collecting it, right? I think the ask is, take the time, carve out a couple of hours a week, or put somebody on the job for a couple of hours a week to organize it in a way that shows trends. Because there are middlemen like us who are educating reinsurance markets about what these trends mean. So if you show them to us, the message is going to get through to the ultimate capacity markets, and that's what solves the pricing problem.
Well, excellent, James. Thanks for that, elaborating on that. I know the next question that we have up here is, how does a broker of record affect cannabis insurance costs?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. It's a mechanism that's unique to insurance. So basically, what it means, right, is if you're a cannabis operator and you have a broker, if another broker wants to come in and give you a competitive bid, they can't really do that unless you sign a contract with them that gives them the legal authority to go out and speak to the markets. And while that might not sound like much on the surface, the reality is it creates a lot of drama for the operator because your incumbent broker gets notified about a new person coming in. There's jealousy, there's competitive tension. Typically, the incumbent broker is blowing up the operator's phone 50 times to say, hey, please don't leave me. But the reality is that the new broker, to get competitive pricing and potentially much lower pricing, can't get very far without that piece of paper.
I find that kind of interesting, to not switch carriers or brokers, but literally even just to get a quote from a different broker, there is a permission on there. I'm assuming that's some legacy rule in this industry that's been here for ages.
It's been around for a long time. Look, you can get quotes. A new broker can get quotes for you without a BOR. But because there are so few capacity markets in cannabis insurance, your incumbent broker will have blocked all of them. And so the new broker won't be able to access the 2 or 3 or 4 cannabis insurance powers that be without getting that signed. In other industries, this is less of a problem because there are more capacity markets.
Yeah. So how does a current operator right now maybe wants to search out other brokers for better prices? How would you recommend someone navigate that opportunity, besides just honestly having an honest conversation with your current broker? But beyond that, if you really want to explore what's out there, how does one go about doing that?
The best thing you can do, right, is ask your broker for a marketing summary, right? And that keeps your incumbent broker honest and on their toes, and they have to demonstrate real and written proof to you that they've reached out to markets 1 through 4, 1 through 10, whatever it is, and those markets have given response X, Y, and Z in terms of their general reaction and their pricing. And if you're not asking them to do that every single year on your renewal, your incumbent broker may just kind of press the re-up button with your incumbent carrier and not work too hard to get rates down, right? Brokers aren't incentivized to get rates down because they earn commission.
So market summary, ask your broker for a market summary. I like that. Cool. I know the next one that we had up here was how could, and actually this is a really important one, a very timely one, is how could rescheduling affect insurance within this industry? And just to cover this, rescheduling currently Schedule 1, talk of the recommendation from HSS to reschedule to Schedule 3.
It can only help. There are a couple of mega brokers and then dozens and dozens of carriers and reinsurers who I think will jump into the cannabis fray if and when rescheduling happens. And, for what it's worth, I'm in the camp of, highly likely in 2024, but probably not as early as some folks think in 2024. It goes back to my opening comments around, how these decisions get made in the boardroom, right? A lot of these companies are very, very large. The insurance industry is one of the largest industries on the planet, right? That and pharma are sort of the 2 biggest industries. You've got some very risk-averse sports, and what they need is a very strong signal from the federal government. And I think rescheduling is about as strong and official as you can get. They'll jump in. More players in the space means more competition. More competition means lower prices. So we do expect it to help a lot. But those insurers, reinsurers, brokers, et cetera, they still need to understand how to price cannabis risk. Rescheduling doesn't guarantee that they'll actually understand how to price it. And so, it goes back to my point around getting your data organized.
Yeah, data organized, and also understanding the needs of cannabis operators. It could be okay to sell, but like there's a lot of niche stuff within this industry. Even after scheduling changes, like going with a broker that actually understands and has experience within cannabis, like I think that's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, look, I mean, these large companies, right? They're going to want to move quickly. They're going to see the opportunity, and in moving quickly, they're going to say, okay, how can we attack this the fastest? Let's use legacy CPG, legacy pharma, legacy tobacco, legacy alcohol insurance application forms, because we think some amalgamation of those applications represents what cannabis is, right, from seed to sale. They're wrong about that, right? It's unique, it's different. And so I think listeners who are operators need to watch out for that and make sure that brokers and the carriers behind them are asking the right and relevant questions.
That's good. Well, we all hope that's going to happen this year, and well, it's on YouTube now. So if you're watching this in 2025, you'll probably know the answer. But actually, speaking of that, like beyond just that, is like the news of 2024. What are some other trends that you were seeing now with cannabis risk and insurance? From property, workers' comp, cyber, auto, crop insurance, D&O, like all those things. What are some of the trends that you see for this year? Is this still hindered in some ways and limited, but as it evolves within the current framework?
Yeah, look, there's no question that markets are softening slightly from year to year. I think things remain really, really firm up until kind of late 2022. And then a few more capacity providers jumped in, and all it took was one or two more to sort of bring things from X to kind of X minus 10%. But there's still a long way to go as far as price is concerned. Property markets have normalized the most in cannabis insurance, and that's because they're hard assets that objectively have value that's understood across multiple industries. On the other end of the spectrum, D&O coverage, I would say, while it's a professional line, obviously not in P&C, it has softened, I think, substantially for private companies, not softened as much for public companies. I think there are a lot of public company D&O underwriters who are looking at, most public stocks being down 90+% over the last 2 years and thinking, okay, what kind of litigation is going to follow here that we need to be on guard for. One more that I'll call out is cyber. This is where I see the biggest mismatch between what operators have versus what they should have. The reality is that cyber is a relatively cheap coverage that operators can get. In fact, it's one of the cheapest that we traffic in. It shouldn't be, because cannabis operators are handling, in a lot of cases, very sensitive personal health information. In some cases, in fact, more cases than I'm comfortable with, they're handling HIPAA applicable data. Insurance underwriters aren't always wise to this, and most cannabis operators, as far as internal controls surrounding data, just don't have HIPAA compliant safeguards in place. So if you're not going to buy a cyber policy, make sure that you have internal controls, especially at retail point of sale, retail workers that may be sending POS sales data to management and that sort of thing that could contain patient data. Be really careful there, because if that leaks, or if there's a breach or a hack or something like that, it can metastasize pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's not good. That's good, some good actionable advice there. My follow up was going to be like, well, how do operators take advantage of some of these trends and make sure that they're covered? But look at cyber coverage, something you'd add relatively cheap that could have a pretty good ROI, and also enforce some internal controls on that as well. This was a lot, James. I really appreciate you taking the time to go over this, and I think really the big takeaway that we have here is that the more organized, structured data that can be obtained from the insurance industry will help drive the understanding of risk and those costs, and hopefully those costs down, because I think operators are paying up for that lack of knowledge, and just another tax on cannabis operators that exists out there. And I love that Frontier Risk is looking to solve that through organizing that data and having that better risk there. So any parting words, James?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're bullish, right, on where this is all going. I think that cannabis operators have been through a lot in the last couple of years. It's the most resilient group of people, frankly, across any industry in any country. Something I'm very proud to be a part of, and we're here to help at Frontier Risk. We understand what cannabis data should look like, and We understand how to translate it for reinsurers to bring lower prices to the market. That's what we're here to do. And we've been through the ringer, just like everybody who's an operator that's listening. We're on your team. We're on the industry's team. And we're looking forward to making a dent in pricing here.
I love it. I love it. So, for anybody who's watching, they want to get a little more information, probably contact with you, ongoing, or just follow some industry trends. What is the best way for people to contact either yourself or Frontier Risk ongoing?
The best thing to do is go to frontierrisk.com. You can apply for any line of coverage right on our website. Very easy, frictionless. We also have an insights section where I talk about everything from my views on cat weather events to rescheduling to, very sort of micro trends across different insurance lines. Some of it's exciting. Some of it's the type of thing you want to fall asleep to.
For those that love inside baseball stuff on insurance, that's where you go. I love it. I love it. James, well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being on. We're looking forward to where you're on there. And thanks for giving some actionable advice and some knowledge to our audience and helping our operators make some better decisions today and then going down the line. So thank you, James.
Thanks for having me.